Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. You know that we have just completed our series on list and this is yet another video in Python where we are going to study the next data structure, which is tuples in Python. Some people also call it as tuple, but I will be calling it tuple in the complete video. So tuples in Python. So without wasting any time, let us understand that what is tuple and how it works. So first of all, we need to know that the basic definition of a tuple. So there is not much significant difference between a list and a tuple. If we see it, in an abstract way, the both list and tuples are collection of objects or elements. But the major difference is the elements that are present inside a tuple, they are immutable. That is, we cannot change their values, right? So tuple is also a sequence, just as lists are. But the tuple is a collection which is ordered but unchangeable. So in list we can change the values, but in tuples we cannot change the values of the elements, right? The major difference in the representation is also there. The lists are represented in square brackets, whereas the tuples are represented in parentheses, or you can say round brackets, right? So even as in list is a collection of heterogeneous elements. Similarly, tuples are also collection of heterogeneous elements. So it is not a restriction that every value inside a tuple should be an integer value, or every value should be a float or a character value. You can have multiple values, but this is a data structure which is used when we know that the data will not change in the course of time, right? So in certain application where we are very sure that the data will not change, we can use tuple, right? So now in order to understand what tuple are, how the functions on it works, and how everything goes on, first of all we need to know how we can create the tuples, right? So the first thing is creating a tuple. So this slide shows the very simple and a basic way of creating a tuple. Here I have created 4 tuples with values with name T0, T1, T2 and T3. The first T0 represent that it has 0 elements, so it's an empty tuple. Then what we have a tuple with one value, that is T1. Now T1 is something really very important and we will be focusing upon T1 a lot in this video. This why I will be telling you afterward. T2 is a tuple with 2 values and T3 is a tuple with 3 values, and I have just printed the values. The major thing is the focus on the value of T1. So what we are studying is a way of creating tuples when we know that how many elements are there and what are the elements of the tuple, right? So the issue is the output will be different when I will be assigning the tuple values like this, right? So without wasting any time, let us move to our Python screen and visualize how we can create a tuple in this fashion. So now I am in my Visual Studio, where I have already installed all the plugins that are required to run Python, and I will be making a separate video of how you can install Visual Studio and install all the required Python plugins so that we can run the Python programs. Right, so in this screen here where this one is written, I will be writing my code and you can visualize the output in the lower section of this Visual Studio. Right, so what we are going to study now is how we can create tuples, right? So the best thing is to create a tuple, very simple manner by making empty round parentheses, right? So what I will be doing, I will be just printing the value side by side so that you can actually understand that what we are doing. So now this is a tuple with 0 values, right? And we can make sure that it is a tuple by printing the type of variable T0, right? So if I will be running the code, in order to run the code, you can click on this, the small triangle over here. And by this, you can see the output in the terminal below screen, which says that the value of T0 is an empty tuple and the class is type tuple, right? So yes, we can create an empty tuple like this. Now, leaving T1, coming straight to T2, when I know that the content of my tuple will be 2 elements, changing over here, let it be 2 and let it be 2. Running it again, you can see on your screen that you have a tuple with 2 values and the class is tuple. Similarly, you can create a 4 tuple, a 5 tuple or a 6 tuple, means any values you can put right here if you know what the values are, and you can get your tuple printed, right? So that is how that is the way how we have actually created the tuples. So that was simple. Now the issue is when we create a tuple with a single value. Tuple with single value, right? So for that I have taken the variable name t1 and I have given only single value. Let me clear the terminal so that you can visualize the answers clearly, right? So this is a tuple with single value and the code will be print t1, right? And we have to make sure that what is the change in the output. So if I run this code, you can see that the output is single one. But the issue is, where are the parentheses? I got only one as the output and the parentheses are missing. And in order to know that yes, if we print a tuple, that should have parentheses intact. So let us check that too. Now this is a tuple with 2 values and I'm just printing it again, right? We have seen it just now. So on running the code, you can just visualize the difference, that if I created a tuple with a single value, you can see I got 1, and if I printed a tuple with 2 value or a 3 value, I got a tuple with brackets on, right? If I answer this question, that what it is, why this is happening, first of all let us see what exactly is t1. So if I type over here the type of variable t1 and run it again, you can see that the type of t1 is an integer. It is not a tuple. And if I run the code again, and if I just copy and paste it over here and check the type of T2, this we have visualized before also. Now T2 is a tuple, whereas T1 is an integer value. So this signifies that in case when we have a one valued tuple, that is a one tuple that we have, we need to put a comma after the single element. Now if I rerun the code, and then you will be visualizing that this is a tuple now having one value, that is class tuple. This is a 2 tuple and class tuple. So now the reason is, in case of a single valued tuple, right, we have to insert a comma, an extra comma, even if I do not have the second value, because it acts as the unpacking operation. Right now, what is unpacking and what is packing, we are going to see afterwards in the later videos of the tuple series. But this is the unpacking operation. If we omit the comma, right? So by putting the comma, we are telling Python that this is a one tuple. Please do not assign the value 1 to the t1 variable. Kindly assign the tuple to the t1 variable, right? So if I remove the the comma, then it will be treating as an integer value, that is 1. If I put the comma, it will be taken as a tuple, right? So the first way of creating tuple is just using the round brackets. Now let us move back to our slides and see how we can create a tuple with a tuple constructor. The second way to create a tuple is by using a tuple constructor. See, here I have shown two example of creating a tuple with a list, and second one creating a tuple with the range function. So we have a tuple method, or you can say a tuple constructor, and as a parameter we can pass any value such as a list. Remember that the value should be an iterable. So a value and then a range, then I can actually retrieve a tuple in return, right? So the return value will be a tuple. So again, let us go to the Python screen and see how this tuple constructor works. The second way of creating a tuple is by using tuple constructor, or simply you can say the tuple method, right? So through a tuple method, how we actually create it, let us have a list name lst and the value be 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? Now I want to create a tuple or a tuple. So here I will be calling the tuple function and passing the lst in it. So if I bring the cursor over this tuple function, you can see here the definition. It is a built-in immutable sequence. If no argument is given, the constructor returns an empty tuple. If an iterable is specified, the tuple is initialized from the iterable items. If the argument is a tuple, then it will be going to return the same object, right? So here I have taken an iterable, which is a list, and if I will be printing it, then I will be getting a tuple in return, right? So let me just clear the screen and enter. So if I see the answer, you can see that I have got a tuple in here. That is, the list is now converted into a tuple. Let me just comment the above code because I no longer require it. So the answer will be a little bit clearer. Again, I will be clearing the screen and here you go. So here if I run the code, then you can see clearly that the list is now converted into a tuple. We can also use the range function over here, that is let be the tuple 2 and the value will be into the tuple and a range function, right? And here I will be giving a range from 1 to 11, that is first 10 natural numbers, and print the value of tuple 2, right? And if I run the code, you can clearly visualize that the second output is just the first 10 natural number, which is the output of the range, and then the range is in turn converted into a tuple and then assigned to the variable tuple 2, right? So that is how we can use the tuple constructor to work upon the tuples. Now coming upon the various operations that we can actually perform on tuple. So talking about the plus operator, right? So the plus operator acts as the concatenator. So here I have two tuples, that is 10, 20, and the second one is having value 30, 40. And if I use the plus operator between the two tuples, then the resultant will be a tuple with the combined values of both the tuples, that is 10, 20, 30, and 40, right? So what it does, it concatenates two tuples. So let us also view this. So in order to check the concatenation operation, let us take a tuple with value 10, 20, another tuple that is T2 that is equal to 30 and 40, and what I want is to print the value of T1 plus T2, right? We can also save this into a new tuple, say T3 or any other variable, and print that also. That will also work. So now let us run the code and see what we are getting as the output. So the output is here the value of the tuples combined, right? So it is actually concatenating the two tuples, right? So that is pretty simple, and this we have also seen in our list also. So plus operator works as a concatenation operator for strings as well as for list and tuples. The next operator that we have already seen in our list and our string also is the multiplication operator, and it repeats the tuple n times, right? So it uses an integer value and it multiplies the tuple through it, and it will be representing, if I talk about the example that you are seeing on your slides, it has a tuple with two values, that is 10, 20, and we are printing the value t1 into 4. So a tuple will be printed which will be having value 10, 20, 10, 20, 10, 20 4 times, right? So it is actually acting as T1 plus T1 plus T1 plus T1 4 times. So it is a simpler to write it actually T1 multiply by 4. So let us see how this works. Now to visualize this, now let me just delete this particular plus operator code, and here I will be writing let's say T2, which is equal to T1 multiply by 4, right? And let me take T3, which is equal to T1 plus T1 plus T1 and plus T1. So here we have taken actually with the multiplication operator and with the plus operator, right? So here let me write with multiplication operator, right? So the value will be here, comma, the value will be T2, and then printing the next one, which is print with your plus operator, right? And the value should be over here T3, and the answer should be the same, but the thing is that the value will be repeated how many times? 4 times. So if I run the code, you can see both the output is the same, but the value is 1020, 1020, 1020, 1020 4 times, right? Both with the multiplication operator and with the plus operator, right? So these were the basic operations that were also available with strings, that was also available with tuples, that are also available with our lists. The next thing is that tuples are ordered. Just the strings are ordered, just as the lists are ordered, the tuples are also ordered. Now, what do we mean by ordered? Ordered means that the elements are properly indexed. That means they have their positional value. So tuple indexing also starts from 0 and goes till the length -1 of the tuple in the positive manner. And we do have the negative indexings in tuple also. The -1 tuple index will represent the last element, and the minus length of the tuple will represent the first element of our tuple. We can also perform slicing on tuple just as we have done in our lists, right? So let us visualize the indexing and the slicing in tuples, how we can do that. So let us make a tuple which have a few values. So let's say I have a tuple, and coming to the tuple, what we have the indexing present in the tuple. So if I print the value which is at index 0, let me just print a value which is at T1 index 4, which should be the last value, right? Because the indexing will be 0 to 4 if I have 5 elements. Then I will be printing the last element of my tuple, say T1, the index value, let it be -1. Print the tuple value. Here what I will be printing, I will be printing the entire tuple by slicing. So here I haven't mentioned the start and the stop. That means the complete tuple will be considered over here. Then what I will be doing in slicing, T1, and if I omit the first value, right, and just give the stop value, let's say as 3, then the indexing will start from 0 and it will be going to 3 minus 1. So let us see that. Let us also see if what we can do is print the tuple in the reverse manner that we have seen by giving the step value as -1, right? So let us run the code and see if the indexing and slicing is possible in tuples or not, because it is entirely similar to your list, right? So just running the code, you can see that yes, you got the first value as 1, then at fourth index you get the value 5, then at the index -1 you got the value 5, and then by putting only the colons in the square brackets, we got the entire tuple. Talking about up till the colon 3 value, we got the value till 0, 1 and 2 index, and by using the 2 colons and -1 slicing operation, we got the tuple in the reversed order. So yes, indexing, the negative indexing as well as slicing is possible in tuple, just as we can do slicing and indexing in our lists. Now talking about the major difference between the list and the tuple, that is immutability. So there are two types of objects that are present in Python. First are immutable objects and second are mutable objects, right? So immutable objects are inbuilt data types such as integer, floater, boolean and strings values in a tuple in simple manner that the immutable objects cannot be changed after they are created. So tuple is the biggest example of immutable object. Talking about mutable objects, they are the types of, the list in dictionary and set. So these are the values, these are the objects whose values can be changed, right? So coming back to our Python screen, let us visualize the concept of mutability and immutability, because that is where the major difference between the list and the tuple rises. So here on my screen, I will be creating a list first. Let us say that the list is of names. So names of animals, let's say dog. So one element, second, let's say cat. Third, let's say, okay, I haven't done this, all right. Then let it be tiger, and then let it be mouse, right? So I have four elements in my list, and what I want the list's first element, that is dog, to be changed to, let's say, I want the value to be lion, right? So sign should be of equal to, right? And here I will be printing the value of my list, right? So this is one thing. I just want to change the value of my list. Now what I will be doing, I will be just copying the code and pasted it over here, and in place of this I will be writing a tuple, right, and changing it to tuple, right, and here. So what we did is we just created a list and a tuple. One more thing, the difference is here, this should be a tuple, right? So what we did over here is we made a list, change its first element, we made a tuple, change its first element. Now let us run it. So here you can see that the list is printed with its first element as lion, dog has been replaced by lion, but you can see that there is a type error when we did the same operation on tuples. What it says tuple objects does not support item assignment. That means we cannot reassign the value inside a tuple, which is the biggest property of tuple, that they are immutable. Right. So in this video, we have seen what the tuple are, what are the ways of actually, creating the tuples, what operations like concatenation and repetition that we can perform on tuple, and we understood the indexing and slicing in tuple along with tuples immutability. Right. So I hope that the introduction video is very much clear to you all. And for more such videos, stay tuned to my channel. Thank you.